A piece of chicot debris weighing 20 pounds, falling 30 feet, strikes the ground with roughly 200 pounds of force. That's enough force to snap a worker's neck in a split second. In this program, we will hear from your fellow workers and how an encounter with this deadly menace has changed their lives. Dennis DeVoe talks about his good friend and fellow worker, Dave Harvey.
Didn't answer me, and I hollered again, "Are you all right?" And I heard him say, "This stupid hard hat." I guess the screen had come off or something. But the way he said it to me, he didn't answer what I asked him. I said, "Did you have an accident?" And he wouldn't answer me. So I began to run up the trail. And I found him in a kneeling position between the stump and the butt of the tree. And he was trying to put the little springs that go on the back that control your screen on your hard hat back together. And at this point in time, I had realized that you could see he had an accident because his face was all pushed in, and he was in bad shape.
A chicot is a dead or partially dead tree of any size or species. Some hardwood species, especially birch, rot from the top first, making them very unpredictable. Most softwood species rot at the trunk or butt end first. Year after year, one fact remains the same: chicots kill. Many who have worked in the bush for some time can tell you a few stories about the chicot that fell within a few inches, or limb that seemed to fall from nowhere. But with any story, there can always be another side to it. Coworkers might tell you about the way they might have seen it happen. The foreman might see it another way while piecing together the incident or accident report. But all too often, it's the coroner who must give his account of what really happened, and this is always the final version.
It sideswiped these two trees that were about 15 or 20 feet away, and it tore off 2 or 3 limbs. It rolled out of there and come down as it sideswiped it, causing those 2 trees to bend over. What happened, as near as I could figure, when the trees come back in their upright position, they give a catapulting effect, which threw a limb about 3 inches around, 2.5 to 3 feet long. And he wore that lengthways into the face.
Remember, leaving chicots standing in the work area is an extremely hazardous practice. Vibrations from nearby cutting and skidder activities, or simply falling from decay, can cause a chicot to fall on a worker. But falling a tree into a chicot is still the easiest way for a cutter to be the cause of his own death. Grécien Gagnon recalls his encounter with a chicot.
Well, the kind of bush there was mixed poplar, birch, and spruce. It was just like it is here, probably, you know, kind of rough. And that black poplar had maybe 6 foot dry in the top. So when the machine hit that black poplar there, the top broke off. And when the machine jumped on those stump and hit the black poplar, she also leaned on one side, you know, turning around and hitting that black poplar and leaning on one side. But I don't remember if I tried to get out of there or just look what was going on under there. That piece broke off the top and came right and hit me right behind the head. So it flipped me right out of the machine. I ended up with a broken shoulder blade, cut in the back of the head, and I had pain in both shoulders and in the neck. And I've been off work for 7 months with that, and I'm still sore. I mean, still feeling the pain.
Often, it is safer and less time-consuming to remove a chicot using the skidder. The skidder should only push a chicot down after the direction of fall has been established. Then the skidder should be backed into a position that is in direct line with the chicot. Since the fair lead is at the highest point on a skidder, it can exert the most pressure and provide the best protection for the operator. So use the fair lead to provide steady pressure against the chicot until it falls. And remember, never push a chicot until the cutter is at a safe distance.
And the chicot fell down. And
Charles Cooch remembers his close call with death.
And so I looked at it and realized I was going to have to buck it up. And so I proceeded to walk around towards the other side of it, which I felt was a safer position to buck it from. Just as I got around at the butt of the chicot, suddenly I felt something strike me and knock me down to the ground. And I wasn't sure what had happened at first, but as I was down on the ground, I could see that a piece of wood had broken across my shoulder. I tried to get up, and I found a hard time because my whole body seemed to lean over towards the left side where I'd been struck. And it took me a little while to get up on my feet, and I went out and signaled the skidder operator, and it was then that I put my hand inside my shirt, and I could feel that my collarbone was sticking way up, and realized that it had been fractured. You know, I realize now that I'm lucky that I wasn't just a few inches over in the to my left side, because chances are then the piece of chicot that did strike me could have snapped my neck. It could have possibly killed me. It could have paralyzed me. The shoulder injury and the broken collarbone is minor in comparison to what could have happened then, but it does make you think about the potential of the accident and the way it happened. If you know, it had been that bad, the effects on myself and my family would have been devastating. I'm lucky, but at the same time, I've also gone through a lot of pain, and trying to get the collarbone reset properly was a long and painful process. It still never really set in the way I would have liked to have had it, and as a result, I'll have to get the bone shaved down afterwards. I'll have to do modified work in the meantime. I'm not to do anything strenuous with my shoulder arm until it is completely healed, which in all is about a 3.5 month period of time.
Falling debris or a broken limb often strike a worker because these hazards come down silently, all too often because he failed to look and see the danger above. Some workers are fortunate to sustain relatively small injuries, like a minor fracture or severe bruising. Others aren't so lucky. The consequences of a severe accident affect more than the worker and his employer. Family and friends also become victims of heartache and anguish. When cutting a chicot, use the common sense approach by establishing the safest direction in which it can be felled. Look around to determine if the chicot will strike or hang up on any other trees. Prepare your escape route as in normal felling at a 45-degree angle in the direction of fall. Examine the chicot for any splits or rot. Make the notch half the diameter of the chicot. A deep notch will allow the chicot to fall more smoothly. Make the back cut slightly above the horizontal cut of the notch. As the chicot begins to fall, retreat along your escape route. This is former logging contractor Willie Lanigan.
My accident happened when I had just finished cutting 3 trees. I had to move about 500, 600 feet away, so I started walking. I don't know what happened, but I was hit on the head, and I ended up on the ground. I was paralyzed, and I could only move my head.
Tom McKenzie is a physiotherapist at the Rehabilitation Center in Ottawa.
What happened when Willie was struck by a chicot is that his head His neck was snapped, like as would happen in a whiplash type injury. And what happened is, as a result of the ligaments around the neck being stretched, there's a lot of internal bleeding and bruising around the spinal cord. And this pressure on the spinal cord damaged the spinal cord, which resulted in a weakness. As a result of Willie's accident, he is diagnosed as a quadriparesis. What this means is he has some spinal cord damage up in his neck, which has left him with weakness in all 4 limbs. When he was first admitted to the rehab center, he was quite involved. He was dependent for getting in and out of bed on somebody else because of the weakness. He was dependent partially for some feeding because he had poor hand control and weakness in his upper extremities, so he wasn't able to lift a cup to his mouth. The muscles of the shoulder he wasn't able to lift against gravity much more than 45 degrees from his side. The muscles in the hand were too weak to hold a fork. In his legs, the muscles around the hip, he wasn't able to move against gravity. These muscles are essential for patients when they're getting up into walking. In his past 4 months while here at the rehabilitation center, Willie has worked a minimum of 2 hours a day in physiotherapy and has made some excellent progress. He's gone from being wheelchair dependent for mobility to a point where he's walking around with using a cane only for balance. His arm function has improved from having minimal function to a point where he's got good arm function, which is functional for self-care and other activities. Okay, to this point, I think Willie's quite fortunate. Most people who have had accidents similar to his normally do not make this much progress. We have to wait another 18 months to find out how much progress he'll actually make. But to this point, he's been very fortunate.
Many workers have been injured and killed by limbs which have sprung back from healthy trees as they were felled. Stay alert to the risk associated with limbs and treetops that often break and spring back. Hardwood stands of timber often have tied-in limbs that can catapult backwards towards an unsuspecting worker. Winter poses an additional threat because frozen limbs and treetops are more easily broken. Chicots and falling limbs. They're always dangerous and often unpredictable. But with knowledge and alert senses, today's logger can reduce and sometimes eliminate these risks. Perhaps learning from those who have experienced the consequences is the best way to learn.
After 4 months of being in a coma, coming out of London Hospital, where they deal strictly with head injuries, being the fact that the brain was damaged so badly from the skull being broken and they had to remove part of the brain, the doctors told us there that when we brought Dave back, that there was really no hope for Dave to recover because of having to remove that part of the brain. They didn't know what would happen. The brain is such a complicated organ. So when you analyze everything that the man is up against and how the doctors feel about it, there's really no hope for him to ever become a person that will function and work and enjoy life again. So it's really a major fatality that's happened, even though he's still alive.
Dave Harvey refused to die. Today, 3 years later, he's back at his home in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, learning how to walk, how to prepare a meal, how to live all over again. After his accident, comatose and suffering massive injuries to his head, He spent weeks in a London, Ontario hospital while doctors worked to treat his physical injuries. Then, still deep in coma and fighting infection, he was transferred to a ward in Hamilton, where he lay motionless and unresponsive for a further 6 months before the day his brother Gary noticed the first feeble signs of movement. Over the next 3 months, he gradually fought his way back to full consciousness, only to find himself totally blind and severely handicapped from brain damage that left his right side virtually paralyzed. Dave has greatly exceeded his doctor's best hopes that he may one day be able to sit up in bed and feed himself. After his year in hospital and 2 more years of hard and often painful physiotherapy, he's been able to work his way back to the point where he can walk again with the aid of a walker or pushing his brother in a wheelchair to steady himself. And while he's afraid that it might be just his imagination, he thinks that he can occasionally see light and shadow, and that the darkness before his eyes may one day lift and again allow him some measure of vision. For Dave Harvey, the struggle has just begun.